This is a quick introduction to markers, felt markers, and the features of the marker, how you best use them, how to try and avoid using them. So basically we've got some double-ended markers, marker pens, and some do's and don'ts. The most important thing to be aware of is that this surface here, this sloping or chisel tip on the tip of any of this type of marker, I think we can see a little bit more detail if we swap to a slightly lighter coloured pen. And it's actually the tip part, you can see it here as it moves, that sloping, a chamfered or chisel tipped sloping end, one on either side, that we're going to use as demonstrated up above here. So it's that edge there as it touches. To do that, we need to slope the pen to an angle so that sloping surface is in flat contact with the paper. So at that point there, runs a long leading mark on the paper. And we're working, if you're right-handed, from left to right, if you're left-handed from right to left. The idea is you've got this trailing stroke as you work your way along the paper. So the first method we're going to look at is basically strike through, which is holding the pen at an angle, getting this parallel movement with the forearm, and using the side of the tip of this chisel tip marker to basically run parallel bands before, through, and out of the object you're trying to render. Very simple. It's called strike through for obvious reasons. Now, we may have slight gaps, we may have a slight banding on that. We'll look at a little bit more detail on that later on. The second method I've referred to as a sort of bordered method or bounded method, where we take the smaller tip end of the pen, the narrow tip end of the pen, and we go round the edge of the surface we want to walk to. This won't have strike through, but what it does give us is a start-stop area for the chisel tip again to use at that same sloped angle, parallel strokes, smoothly with the working from the forearm, so it's a render grip, right the way across and filling in. Now that's the one people will recognise as the neat to the tidy one. Everything else I'm going to do as a strike through. So this one here is taking that strike through technique for a cylinder where we try and get a little bit of a gradation or graduation in colour or tone. I'm going to leave that little white band there intentionally, and on the lower edge, as if this was a cylinder rolling towards us, the lower edge would be darker, so taking the same marker and repeated strokes on the under edge. As with any of these things, the edge, if it's reinforced with the same colour as well as a dark line, it just adds impact. So we're going to do the same technique at edges in a minute. The fourth one here, this is looking at a radius object, something with rounded edges. Again, identical to the top, strike through technique. We're going to look at now how we can get this idea of a rounded, curving edge, gradually getting tighter round it, a little bit like the cylinder, but more intense, changing in tone much quicker. And this would be on all four surfaces. It's actually easier to work horizontally as I'm doing at the moment. The page is at an angle to where I'm sitting. This should have really been done with turning the page, but because I want this fixed so you can see the camera position, I've changed the grip to work towards myself. That's not a very good grip to work with. I'd much rather work with the one that strokes away. Then using the other end of the marker just to tidy up the corners to let the radius in. So we've got a slightly darker version of the same colour, getting more intense towards the edge. A couple of strokes towards the lower edge will always help. The last one on this we're going to look at is a chamfered or sloping edge, and again, normal, straightforward strike through technique. And then on the area that's got that sloping bevel or chamfered edge, we're just going to make that distinct area darker. White pencils, now there's different types, they can be quite expensive, but they're well worth getting hold of to add highlights. I'm using a fairly upright grip here to try and get a little bit of white where we didn't have white before, but we've actually gone over with the colour. And whether it's an area like I'm doing here on this upper bevel, this upper sloping surface with the white pencil, or it's a little line as we've got on the cylinder, or to a much more intense degree on the radius object. We're going to add some backgrounds to help that in a minute or two. Now the don'ts. These are the things that are going to wreck your markers and produce not very good work. This is a fairly obvious one, just scratching or scrubbing back and forward. And it's what would happen if you let a youngster loose with pens. Next one I referred to as like seeing your DNA results. It's this stop-start technique where we're not got a smooth passage of the pen and we get this barring effect on the surface. So we're not got a smooth passage. The third one is having no real direction when we're rendering and to let the paper or the object to wander a bit, and it looks very, very messy. It can be useful later on, but for basics we're trying to avoid that. The last one I've referred to as open tap. Now I'm just holding that down. I will maybe get a close-up view of that in a minute or two. If you put the chisel tip down on the paper, just watch the paper itself and how the ink flows like an open tap, bleeding onto the paper and through the paper, and indeed underneath. So The do's, the don'ts, very quick run through. This isn't going to take long at all, folks, but it's worth looking over again. What I'm doing now is using a chisel tip black marker to give the outline of these strike through techniques a chance to stand out by basically getting rid of the overspill, the strike through. So using the side of the tip of the marker for sides, and again, I should have really turned the page. These vertical strokes are not nearly as good. Turning the page, much easier way of using the marker, using that sloping chisel tipped edge. Using this fine end of the pen then just to tidy up where the profile, that rounded edge would appear, or on the lower one where that sloping or chamfered edge. Now I think certainly in the lower one where the difference in the three tones from those pinks, the dark one at the bottom, mid one in the middle, and lighter with a white pencil on top should stand out. So the black outline, very useful in all of these. I could have gone around them all. There's one I don't have to do. We're just maybe making it a little bit more intense, so using the strike through with the black background down, you can still strike through and add a little bit more weight to the lower surfaces. Remember, we're assuming the light's coming from the top left hand corner, and virtually all the drawings we're doing. There we are, just a quick run around through. This is actually speeded up, folks. The marker works a little bit quicker than real time, so 130% real time, and just giving a little bit more of an edge. Remember, the outground, in case you didn't know, a black or dark edge to contrast that. So, do's and don'ts, double-edged marker, fairly simple to use, fairly simple to get wrong. Please be aware of bleeding through. For more information, Get a Grip Graphics online. Enjoy your sketching.